Alright, so today's episode brings us down to Metro Scooter in Cincinnati. This is cool scooter shop, so anything on 10, 12, 14 or whatever more inch wheels, you can find it right there. And this is the guy who runs the place. This is Steph. Despite him just bolting on a CDI to the side of the frame, he actually knows what he's doing. And this is John. He always has the best ideas.
We'll just cut a notch out of your seat.
Together, they form this awesome, passionate duo that lives and breathes scooters. So I've known Steph and John for quite a while now, and when I heard that Steph was taking over Metro, I wanted to offer something, and I wanted to do it in the best way that I could. It's build something stupid fast. So before we put this engine into this frame, there was some work to do. So the story behind the scooter is that it was seized like a year and a half ago, and it's been sitting ever since, simply because, you know, running a business takes up a lot of time and you barely get to wrench on your own stuff. So I approached him and be like, hey, why don't I just, mess with it? So it came with a good crankshaft already. It unfortunately has eaten the oil seal. You can see here there's a bunch of scratches on the side. So I tore it down and I just was looking at it and trying to figure out what I should do. One thing was 100% certain though, this thing was meant to go fast.
Oh, that's cool.
So because this engine was getting more power, I decided to why not stretch out the primary transmission. So I did put a 23 tooth clutch in it and a 65 tooth primary gear. So I basically took a P200 primary and I swapped out the axles. Swapping out the axles is necessary because the diameter at the end is different. So you gotta put the newer LML ones in order to fit it into the cases. So at this point, Steph came forward and was like, hey, I have this Polini 177. Why don't we do something with that? So yes, I didn't say no because I do really like that cylinder. Here it is in comparison to a 5-port LML. Because this is running on a 57mm stroke, not the long stroke, I wanted to measure the timings because I really haven't done it on original stroke. And I was in for a surprise because there was a lot of work to be done. So stock timings were 161 degrees on the exhaust, 110 degrees on the intake, which is a little bit boring. So I wanted to get to 185, 125, which kind of is what I had on the Orange Stella. So the plan is to put a spacer underneath of 1.5mm together with a 0.22mm gasket, raises the cylinder by 1.72mm. Of course, in order to do some proper port work on the cases, I reinforced them on both sides with some epoxy. Here I use simple JB weld. I actually wanted to get it in gray, but I think I just took the wrong one off the shelf. This is technically in white. But I put it on both the clutch side and the ignition side simply because it got me more leeway while I was working with the Dremel. Adapting a Polini to LML cases is always tricky because you have to add a little bit to the cylinder and take more of the cases. So I ended up with these large ports on the cases, which meant that I also had to take some stuff off the cylinder. Here I am sliding it on, trying to align it, and this meant that I had to open the ports towards the exhaust. But I also cleaned them up while I was at it. So when you put 1.5mm underneath, you gotta take some stuff up on top, because otherwise you kind of mess with the compression, right? So I had it decked as a professional machinist who took off 1.75mm for me, which after lots of measuring and work on the exhaust port, I came up to 1.35mm squish and timings of 122 to 182. With the engine back together, it was time to put in the frame, and I was doing that at the garage of Metro Scooter. So at this point, shout out to Ken out in Chicago from Moto Fabrica. He donated this Prima exhaust for the cars, which would run well with the cylinder the way I set it up. In order to support this exhaust, I was going to mount this PHBH28, it's the old one from my 200 setup. And these stock LML reeds were going to get the poison treatment. While we had everything apart, the guys decided to ditch the oil tank. And while the tank was out, we found that there was rodents nesting in the frame. So that meant we had to check all the wires, make sure that nothing was gnawed on. And while doing that, Seth took everything that was on the battery side and removed it and put it inside the frame. The plan was to use a combined PX CDI and put it inside the frame underneath the seat and run it from there. And now it was time to marry the engine and the frame.
You earned that. You made that rust. You earned it. It's yours. Shift where? What's that?
Like first. Yep, we're good.
Start Cincinnati.
And Seth's ingenious idea to bolt the coil to the side of the frame was just
That's all about adding.
so we can fire it up and see if everything's okay. And the last step was to mount the exhaust, which turned out to be harder than we wanted it to be, but it all worked out in the end.
Ow.
So the first start was a huge success, but there was some stuff left to do. Throttle cable needed to be done wiring, and then the clutch cable adjuster was kind of rusted into the engine. So that of course is going to take us a couple of weeks, because everyone was so busy and we didn't really get the time to get together and fix it. But then eventually, it was done. So here you can see it in all its glory. It has a rusted old style P-cowl on one side, the fender is cut, it's rusted as well. The front and the back have B-Tubo shocks, and everything kind of has that raggedy look that says, you know what, I don't care about your rules. So I dialed in the engine, and boy, A, does it sound great, and B, holy crap, it moves. So I did a second gear pull so I can put it into the SIP frequency dyno, and boy, we were in for a surprise. With still most of its power available, between 7 and 8,000 RPM, and combine this with a P200 gearing, you gotta watch out for those speeding tickets. Building this bike has been so much fun, and it's kind of my way of wishing Seth good luck in his new endeavor. I invite you to go and check out Metro Scooter. Besides scooters, they also built this really rad Kimco spades. Give them a like on their Facebook page, follow them on Instagram, there's always cool content showing up. And if you're in Cincinnati, go by and check out the store. Saturday mornings there's coffee and donuts, so make sure to not miss that. And then last but not least, I left a little message on the cylinder. I haven't really told Seth, so this is my way of telling him, like, hey, I wrote on your stuff. That was important. And if you're following us closely on our social media, probably noticed that we've been doing some live streams in the past couple months, which is a lot of fun. So if you get a notification, we usually announce it an hour, 2 hours in advance. Come and hang out, chat with us, and mostly see me fail, because on live stream there's nothing you can hide. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit that little bell, apparently that's a YouTube thing. And I'll see you in the next video. Doggy.